Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, panelists, and colleagues, my name is Jean d'Aragon, Senior Sustainable Development Expert at the Office for Sustainable Development, UNOSD, in Incheon, Republic of Korea. I would like to welcome and thank you all for joining the 2021 and 22 International Mayors Forum. The forum is organized by UNOSD in collaboration with our sister office, the United Nations Center for Regional Development, UNCRD, based in Nagoya, Japan, which is, like UNOSD, also part of the Division for Sustainable Development Goals, DSDG, at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, mostly known as UNDESA, at the UN headquarters in New York. The general objective of the International Mayors Forum is to provide a platform for policy dialogue and knowledge sharing on key aspects related to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, at local level. The forum is meant to help achieve a better understanding of progress, gaps, challenges, lessons learned, and specific mechanisms that can accelerate the sustainable transformation needed to make our societies more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The 2021-22 edition of the International Mayors Forum follows and builds upon the previous editions of the Mayors Forum, particularly last year's edition, looking at the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on cities and local governments. It also aims to identify potential solutions which can support a swift recovery from the current crisis and accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, as well as other international agreements for sustainable development. Previous editions of the International Mayors Forum were held in Asia and Africa. We had planned to hold one Mayors Forum in Latin America during the fall of 2019, in Ecuador actually, but we had to cancel it at the last minute. Our initial intention was still to hold the Mayors Forum successively in different continents and regions of the world, in rotation every year. This year, we were hoping to resume the in-person event in Incheon City, where our office is based. But as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic made us change our course once again. The past editions of the International Mayors Forum were in person or face-to-face meeting held over 3 to 4 days, giving us an opportunity to cover a wide range of sustainable development goals issues at local level. Given the current situation that forces us to hold the forum online only, again this year, we had to limit ourselves to fewer topics due to time constraints that come with such a format. We strongly believe, however, that the topics selected for the International Mayors Forum this year are key to fulfill the overreaching and specific goals we set for this edition of the Mayors Forum. Tonight, we will hear our distinguished opening speakers and panelists of diverse backgrounds from across the world who are involved in one way or another in making our cities and communities more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, supporting a swift recovery from the COVID-19 crisis and accelerating the implementation of existing international agreements, including the Sustainable Development Goals. Before we do so, I would like to remind the speakers and presenters to keep their speech and presentation within the time allotted, as we have a very tight schedule tonight. Also, please kindly mute your microphone when not speaking to ensure minimal background noise while others are presenting and speaking. As well, there's a parallel chat during the forum, so please feel free to use it to engage with the audience and answer questions during the Q&A and or react to other panelists' presentation. I'd like to also invite everyone in the audience to make use of the parallel chat and Q&A to ask questions and share your comments. Also, Please note that all the material will be uploaded and available on the International Mayors Forum webpage, including the speeches, presentations, as well as the video recordings of all the sessions. The e-link will be provided in the chat box. Finally, I would like to remind you also to please join us tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for the other sessions of the International Mayors Forum spreading over 4 days. The links will also be shared in the chat box. Thank you. Now, without further ado, let's start with the welcome remarks from our distinguished speakers. We will hear Mr. Liu Zhenmin, Undersecretary General of Economic Affairs, through a video. So Mr. Liu Zhenmin of China was appointed as the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, effective 26 July 2017. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Liu was Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of China since 2013. Among his various diplomatic assignments, he served as ambassador and permanent representative at the permanent mission of the People's Republic of China to the United Nations office in Geneva and other international organizations in Switzerland between 2011 and 2013. As Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu guides UN Secretariat support for follow-up processes of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the high-level political forum on sustainable development. Mr. Liu oversees DESA's policy analysis and capacity development work. He advises the UN Secretary General on all development-related issues, including climate change, internet governance, and financing for development. So let's hear the video.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you to the 4th edition of the International Mayors Forum, organized by the UN Office for Sustainable Development. On behalf of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, I wish to recognize our partners, the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea and the Incheon Metropolitan City, for their support to UNOSD over the last 10 years. Their contributions in bringing together local and regional governments, experts, and stakeholders committed to implementing the Sustainable Development Goals at the local level is highly appreciated. This year's forum will examine the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on cities and local governments. It will identify potential ways to support a swift and sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 crisis and to contribute to our common agenda. As noted by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, this is an agenda for action designed to accelerate implementation of existing international agreements, including the SDGs. Distinguished participants, local and regional governments, including municipal authorities in cities and towns, have a vital role to play on the path to sustainable development. Indeed, cities and human settlements are hubs for innovation and entrepreneurship. They are among the main incubators for knowledge generation, production, and innovation in science and technology, as well as in governance, social development, art, and culture. They also play a leading role in decent employment, productivity growth, and economic development. they generated over 80% of the global gross domestic product. Yet, local authorities face their share of challenges, while accommodating more than half of the world's population on barely 2 to 3% of the Earth's land. Cities consume nearly 80% of global energy and generate over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Moreover, they are becoming more vulnerable to the increasing frequency of climate-related extreme events. These challenges are further compounded by the impact of the COVID-19 on economic activities. Estimated 90% of the COVID-19 cases have been reported in urban areas, where cities and local governments are estimated to lose on average between 15 to 25% of their revenues. This is affecting their ability to provide basic services. Yet, the COVID-19 crisis presents us with the opportunity to reimagine a better future through our response to a fairer and more equal world. Cities are in a unique position to contribute to a sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. I'm delighted that your forum will focus on concrete solutions to support a sustainable recovery, provide the tools to help achieve our common agenda, and accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Indeed, the achievement of SDGs and a sustainable, inclusive, and a resilient recovery will largely depend on local action. I wish you a successful event. I thank you.
I'd like to thank Mr. Liu Zhenmin, Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, for his welcoming speech. Now we have Her Excellency Ms. Han Jae-Hong-hye, Minister of Environment, Republic of Korea. Again, it's through video. Her Excellency Ms. Han Jae-Hong-hye is the 19th Minister of the Environment in the Republic of Korea. Prior to her current position, she was a member of National Assembly of the Republic of Korea for 3 consecutive terms from 2012 to 2020, where she served as a member of National Assembly Committee on Environment and Labor, co-chair of the National Assembly Forum on Climate Change, and chair of the Policy Committee for Democratic Party. She is also currently leading the Carbon Neutral Society of the Republic of Korea and strive to implement inclusive environmental policy services to the benefits of environmental welfare and safety for all. She has years of extensive experience in various areas related to environment, including climate change, air pollution, land and waste, ecosystem, and health control strategy and policy. She received a bachelor's and a master's degree in environment engineering from Busan National University, Republic of Korea, and earned a PhD in industrial engineering from the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom. Let's hear a video.
안녕하세요. 대한민국 환경부 장관 한정혜입니다. 국제시장포럼 개최를 진심으로 축하드리고요. 이번 포럼을 준비해 주신 박천규 UN 지속가능발전센터 원장님, 류전민 UN 경제사회처 사무차장님, 그리고 박남춘 인천시장님을 비롯한 각국의 시장님들과 또 참여해 주신 모든 분들께 감사 인사를 드립니다. 우리가 세운 지속가능발전 목표는 지역과 도시에 살고 있는 우리 한 사람 한 사람의 자각, 그리고 구체적인 실천을 통해서 비로소 달성할 수 있습니다. UN 지속가능발전센터는 그간의 도시와 지방정부의 중요성에 주목해서 국제시장포럼을 개최해왔고요. 특히 올해 포럼은 코로나19가 도시에 미치는 환경, 경제, 사회적 영향을 평가하고 또 지속 가능한 해결책을 모색하는 자리입니다. 그리고 그 시작은 바로 탄소 중립에 기반한 포용적인 도시를 만들어 나가는 것입니다. 이는 곧 지속 가능한 생산과 소비 체계를 구축하고 지역 특성에 맞는 온실가스 감축 전략을 세우며 누구도 소외되지 않는 공동체를 만드는 일이기도 합니다. 대한민국 정부도 도시의 녹색 생태계 회복을 위한 스마트 그린 도시와 지역의 탄소 중립을 선도할 탄소 중립 그린 도시를 선정하고 지원하는 등 지속 가능한 도시 조성을 위해서 노력하고 있습니다. 오늘 이 자리가 세계 각국의 우수한 도시 모델 사례를 공유하고 도시와 지방정부의 구체적인 실천을 이끄는 뜻깊은 자리가 되길 기대합니다. 다시 한번 이번 포럼을 준비해 주신 분들께 감사드리며 2022년은 우리 모두의 꿈에 한 걸음 더 다가가는 희망의 해가 되기를 기원합니다. 고맙습니다.
I would like to thank the Minister of Environment, Ms. Han Jae-Hee, for a welcoming speech. Now I would like to, we'll have a video from the mayor, the Honorable Mayor Nam-Chung Park, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City. Mr. Nam-Chung Park is the mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City. He was the former chairman of the Democratic Party of Incheon Division of the Republic of Korea and served as the member of the 19th and 20th National Assembly in the Republic of Korea. He was also appointed as the vice chairman of the policy committee for the Democratic Party and took several positions at the presidential offices as the senior presidential secretary for personal management, the presidential secretary for personal affairs, and the chief officer for state affairs. Honorable Mr. Nam-Chung Park received his Bachelor in Public Administration at the Korea University in the Republic of Korea and his Master in Science in International Transport at the University of Wales in the United Kingdom. We'll listen to his video.
반갑습니다. 대한민국 인천광역시장 박남춘입니다. 국제시장 포럼 개최를 진심으로 환영합니다. 행사 준비를 위해 써주신 UN 지속가능발전센터 박천규 원장님과 관계자 여러분, 바쁘신 중에도 기꺼이 발표와 토론을 맡아주신 국내외 전문가분들, 환경부 한정혜 장관님과 UN 류젠민 사무차장님께도 감사드립니다. 오늘부터 4일 동안 열리는 국제시장 포럼에서는 코로나19 위기가 도시와 지역, 사회에 미친 영향을 함께 살펴보고 가능한 회복 방안을 함께 논의하는 자리가 될 것입니다. 온라인으로 함께하고 계신 여러분 모두 포럼 기간 동안 다양한 논의에 함께 해주시기 바랍니다. 어느덧 코로나19 발생 3년 차에 접어들었습니다. 끝날 듯 끝나지 않는 팬데믹 위기는 오미크론 변이 바이러스를 타고 또다시 전 세계를 괴롭히고 있습니다. 위기를 극복하고 일상을 회복하기 위해서는 우리 모두, 특히 지방정부 간 연대가 절실합니다. 코로나19가 끝이 아닙니다. 위기는 또 다른 모습으로 언제든지 우리에게 닥쳐올 수 있습니다. 이를 사전에 예방하기 위해서는 지속 가능하고 회복력 있는 도시를 향한 혁신이 꼭 필요합니다. 각국 지방정부의 대응 사례와 교훈을 살펴보고 우리가 앞으로 나아가야 할 방향을 함께 고민해야 합니다. 이번 포럼이 그 고민을 공유하는 좋은 자리가 될 것입니다. 인천시도 논의에 함께 하겠습니다. 우리 시는 인천형 뉴딜을 통해 다양한 도시 문제 해결 방안을 제시하고 기후위기 대응 모범도시로 거듭나기 위해 노력하고 있습니다. 지난해 국제협력을 강화하기 위해 기후기술센터 네트워크 CTCN 협력연락사무소를 송도에 유치하기도 했습니다. 인천에 소재하고 있는 국제기구에 대한 지원도 아끼지 않겠습니다. 참여해 주신 여러분께 다시 한번 환영의 말씀을 전하며 조속한 시일에 인천에서 다시 만나 뵐 수 있기를 희망합니다. 감사합니다.
Would like to thank the Honorable Mr. Incheon Park, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City, for his welcome remarks. Now it's time to have the opening remarks, and we'll have Mr. Chong-Gyun Park, Head of Office at the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, UNOSD. Before joining UNOSD, Mr. Chong-Gyun Park has served as the government for almost 30 years, mainly at the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea, where he joined in 1991, starting at mid-level management, rising to the rank of the Vice Minister of Environment. Mr. Park's work ranged from air and water quality management to nature conservation, waste management, chemical management, several sewage system. Tackling climate change has been his major concern and produced lots of achievements in the ministry, including setting up Korean national mitigation targets. He graduated from Yonsei University, majoring in public administration, and hold a master's degree in development policy and public administration at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Now, please, Mr. Park, that you pronounce your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, John. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everywhere from the world. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and respected colleagues. On behalf of the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, I would like to cordially welcome you all to the 2021-2022 International Mayors Forum and express my sincere appreciation to all the mayors, policymakers, researchers, NGOs, and other stakeholders for taking out of your busy schedule to attend this meeting. I would also like to extend my most sincere appreciation to Mr. Liu Zhenmin, UN Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Her Excellency Ms. Han Jung-hye, Minister of Environment of the Republic of Korea, and Honorable Mr. Incheon Park, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City, for their warm, welcoming remarks. Also, I want to express my sincere appreciation to our broad organizations like UNCRD, Mr. Gajushige Endo, co-organizer of this event, and UNPOG, Mr. Shin Bo-kim, for their wonderful support. As John mentioned earlier in the introduction part, originally we have planned to invite all of you to Incheon to see each other face to face and have lively discussion together. But due to the COVID-19 situation, we have to change its format to a virtual one. However, I'm hopeful that the day is not far off when we can all come together in person as we did in better times. Ladies and gentlemen, cities are home to over half of humanity. They generate over 80% of the world's GDP. They are incubators of knowledge, production, and innovation in art and culture, the core of science, governance, commerce and industry, and social development. But alongside the fast-paced expansion of urban communities, the challenges they face them, such as rising inequality and social exclusion, unemployment, food insecurity, extreme poverty, and others, are becoming ever greater as well. Cities are also bearing the brunt of COVID-19. The pandemic has laid bare such vulnerabilities of cities and even made them worse in the developed and developing worlds alike. Local governments around the world have faced and continue to face these challenges with challenges of their own, such as practice in public service delivery systems, labor policy coherence, lack of coordination between different parts of government, and limited financial and human resources, to name a few. Moreover, they face existential challenges posed by environmental degradation and climate change. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction tells us that 90% of major disasters over the last 2 decades are climate-related. While cities grapple with climate disruption and environmental degradation, they are also major contributors, generating over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for more than half the world's population on only 2 to 3% of land on Earth. Cities will continue to be critically affected and risk without effective action and transformation. It is therefore incumbent on all of us to make them more sustainable in resource consumption, production, recovery, and social economic development. The successful implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals hinges on the meaningful involvement of local actors in cities as recognized by the new urban agenda. We need to literally mind that the health and the well-being of cities will help determine our collective future. The importance of engagement of cities and local governments are well addressed in several important international frameworks as well. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030 calls for supporting cooperation and mutual learning among local governments in order to reduce disaster risk. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and SDGs specifically called for making cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, a virtually impossible proposition without the contribution of cities, who consume up to 78% of global energy and generate over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The new urban agenda placed onus on cities to do more, given that nearly 2/3 of the 169 SDG targets depend upon the sustainable involvement of local urban actors. As we build back, what shall we say, build forward better from COVID-19, this forum engages mayors, local leaders, and stakeholders to explore social, economic, and environmental impacts of the current crisis on cities and local governments, and to identify potential solutions for sustainable recovery from the COVID-19. Furthermore, we'll discuss strategies and measures to enhance local government's knowledge and skills to facilitate progress for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and other international frameworks and agreements. I hope this forum serves to provide the opportunity for the participants to achieve a better understanding of progress, gaps, challenges, and lessons learned to enable sustainable recovery from the current crisis and to accelerate implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, which will guide us towards a healthy, green, inclusive, resilient, innovative, and low-carbon future. Once again, I thank you for joining us in this conversation, and let us learn from each other and discuss ways to enhance knowledge and skills of local authorities. I hope that this year's forum will contribute meaningfully not only to overcoming the pandemic crisis, but also in the longer term to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and our common agenda. Thank you for your attention. Now
Thank
over
you.
to you, Alex, Zhang.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chong-Yu, for your welcome opening speech. I would like to now invite Mr. Kasunshige Endo, Director of the UN Center for Regional Development, UNCRD, in Nagoya, Japan. Mr. Kasunshige Endo assumed the position of Director of UNCRD in August 2018. Prior to this, he was the Deputy Director General of the Great East Japan Earthquake. If you remember, that it Japan in 11th March 2011. and the reconstruction project in the Iwati office, reconstruction agency of the Cabinet Secretariat. He joined the Ministry of Land and Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism in 1990, following his graduation from Kyoto University as a Master's of Transport Engineering. His career in Japan covers more than 10 engineering positions at the government headquarters, the National Highway Management Offices, and local authorities. He transferred to the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, and the World Bank as Senior Highway Engineer, Transport and ICT Global Practice in the Africa region from 2012 to 2015. And he also had varied experience in international development projects. He's a certified professional engineer in Japan and a PEC engineer, a PAC engineer. Mr. Endo-san, please take the mic. It's yours.
Thank you, John. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. So first, I thank UNOSD for organizing this forum and having UNCRD as co-organizer. And it's my pleasure to speak on the International Mayors Forum. UNCRD has been co-organizer since the first International Mayor Forum in Vientiane, Lao PDR in 2017. First, let me introduce UNCRD and talk about why the Mayors Forum is important for us. So 50 years ago, the UN Economic and Social Council adopted a resolution calling for member states to facilitate research and training program in the field of regional development. The government of Japan responded to this call, and UNCRD was established and located in Nagoya City of Japan. So this resolution still sheds light, and the regional development approach continues to be a very useful instrument for localizing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and SDGs. UNCRD has experiences in capacity building in urban planning through integrated approach linking key sectors such as transport, waste management, and disaster risk reduction. Now, International Mayors Forum is a significantly important forum for us because the forum discusses topics relevant to our activities like smart city. It is timely to discuss agendas on science, innovation, and technology for promoting smart city development. We believe UNCRD's accumulated knowledge is useful for smart city development. We have started a capacity building program on smart cities for inclusive and sustainable society in the post-COVID-19 pandemic, which funded by the Ministry of Land Infrastructure Transport of Japan. I will make a presentation today. The best way of building back better from COVID-19 is fully implementing the 2030 Agenda. However, it cannot be implemented in isolation, so International Mayors Forum is a great opportunity to share knowledge and lessons. Other sustainable development issues that UNCRD address include the environmentally sustainable transport, EST Forum, and 3R, reduce, reuse, recycle, and resource efficiency. And also disaster risk reduction. UNCRD supports Secretariat of High-Level Expert and Leaders Panel on Water and Disasters, which is chaired by Dr. Han-Soo Soo, former Korea Prime Minister. Finally, volunteer local reviews and SDGs evaluation and monitoring tool. If some of you are interested in those issues, topics, we are very happy to work with you. Finally, I have a small announcement that UNCRD will have the 50th anniversary commemorative event. It will be next month on 23rd February. My colleague put this event program on the chat box. I look forward to having discussions and sharing knowledge and experiences with all the participants. Finally, thank you for your attention. Back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Endo-san, for your opening remarks. I would like now to start with the first panelist. If you are ready, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bokyung Shin, Head of UN Project Office on Governance, DPIDG, UNDESA. Mr. Bokyung Shin is Head of Office of the United Nations Project Office on Governance, UNPOG, which is an integral part of the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government, DPIDG, at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. Since his inauguration in March 2020, he has been dedicated to contributing to strengthening public administration capacities in developing member states, to advance the 2030 agenda and for sustainable development. Prior to joining the United Nations, Mr. Shim was the Vice Minister of the Interior and Safety of the Government of the Republic of Korea. Mr. Shim completed doctorate. Yeah, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. John. Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, honorable mayors and USG Liu Zhenmin, Mr. Chong-Gyun Park, head of UNOSD, our brother organization in UNDESA. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening to all of you. My name is Bokyung Shin, head of UN Project Office on Governance of the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government of UNDESA. It is a great pleasure to be joining this very important 2021 to 22 International Mayors Forum. My presentation today will focus on whole of government approach and effective institutions for SDGs localization. This is overview of my presentation. Before I delve into the main content of my presentation, I'd like to briefly introduce the United Nations Project Office on Governance. UNPOG's mission is to strengthen the public governance capacities for sustainable development. We have three pillars of activities. One is research, two is capacity development, three is networking. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is interconnected with the Paris Climate Agreement, the new Urban Agenda, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. The achievement of the 2030 Agenda depends largely on progress made at the local level. 65% of the 169 targets underlying the 17 SDGs will not be reached without the engagement of and coordination with local and regional governments. The High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, HLPF, pledges for an equality-driven system that fully engages local and regional governments powered by a green and sustainable vision. Starting from COP26 in Glasgow, cities and regions of the world invite all nations to deliver multi-level collaboration action to avoid climate disasters, rapidly driving our world and communities to a point of no return. According to OECD, lack of awareness, capacities, or trained staff, and insufficient financial resources are some of the challenges in implementing the SDGs at the local level. Local governments should look beyond the horizon and go hand in hand with the local communities and partnership with international organizations. Globalization is the driving force for the development of communities and the balanced development in a global world. localization requires us to think globally, act locally when making decisions related to the everyday life of the community. Global hyperconnectivity and increased system integration have led to vast benefits, including worldwide growth in incomes, education, innovation, and technology. But rapid globalization has also created concerns because of the repercussions of local events now cascade over national borders, and the fallout of financial meltdowns and environmental disasters affects everyone. The butterfly effect addresses the widening gap between systemic risks and their effective management. It shows how the new dynamics of turbocharged globalization has the potential and the power to destabilize our societies. Effective governance for SDG localization needs vision, strategy, system, people, process, partnership. For example, empowering local governments to implement the SDGs addresses recognized needs for strong legal frameworks, enabling fiscal frameworks and financing mechanisms, digitization of systems and capacity development, improved data collection and management system, partnerships with the private sector, civil society organizations. Achieving the SDGs at the national and local level largely depends on the adoption of the 11 key principles of effective governance as prepared by the UN CEPA and endorsed by the UN ECOSOC. These principles must be effective, accountable, and inclusive. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. VUCA is used to describe key characteristics of the external environment. For example, the COVID-19 situation and climate change have been volatile, and now we are living in a time of uncertainty. The COVID and the climate crisis world we are living in form of VUCA operating environment for business everywhere, an organizational environment that is volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous. Therefore, we should invest in information gathering capability and then use that information to build agility and contingency options for the future. To do so, we should collaborate and need whole of government approach. VUCA is a valuable analytical tool, so VUCA analysis for better issue planning and management is a valuable tool for SDG localization. Local governments have always had to cope with ambiguity and uncertainty in decision making. The world is changing, yet we can be stuck with outdated ideas in a world where the only certainty is uncertainty. Transformation doesn't start with an idea, a process, or even a technological innovation. Transformation starts with a mindset. You are stronger than you think. All the accountabilities should start with yourself. A transformative mindset builds skills, flexibility, and agility. It's necessary to adopt a whole of government approach encompassing behavioral changes at the individual, organizational, institutional levels. I would like to recommend step-by-step actions as shown in the slide. Stance and position. Anyone, anywhere can start an initiative of change. If you want to change the world, start with yourself first, as Mahatma Gandhi said. Starting with yourself can inspire others to follow your example, creating collaboration and teamwork. You can create change when you see and feel the needs of citizens by walking through the whole process of the project. If you want change, you need to capture and analyze the data. Then you will find optimal solutions. The last step is to put the solutions into action for SDG implementation at the local level in collaboration with the stakeholders and partners. then you can maximize the benefits and the satisfaction of end users. I'd like to highlight some of the key measures to implement the SDGs at the local level. One is empower and resource local regional governments. Two is the strategies need to harness the potential of basic service delivery in reducing inequalities. Three is national SDG strategies that include robust localization policies. Four is support local and regional involvement in SDG localization through voluntary, local, and subnational reporting. Five is mobilize the potential and the momentum of the global localization movement. Six is support, promote, bottom-up monitoring, and localized indicators. Renew the multilateral system building on the strength of local, regional governments and including all stakeholders. UNPOG is currently promoting effective public governance through training toolkits, handbooks, capacity needs assessments, and policy briefs. The curriculum is prepared as a comprehensive set of training of trainers' capacity development toolkits. It contains right-to-use and customizable training material on key governance dimensions. The curriculum provides methodologies, approaches to advance knowledge and assist governments to advance the implementation of SDGs. These are the 10 capacity development toolkits. Among them, UNPOG has developed 3 training toolkits: national to local, social inclusion. The third is risk-informed governance and innovative technologies for DRR and resilience. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Over to you, Mr. Zhang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bok-Yoon-shin, for this very interesting presentation. Something comes to my mind is like you talked about the 11 principles of good governance, and then a lot of people are asking about this. So I wonder if your team could put on at least we have a link to find those, because I think it's very important to share this with then we could also maybe discuss with this later on. Thank you very much. I will now invite the next speaker, the second panelist, Ms. Licia Saneriu, Professor, Organization Development and Institutional Learning, President of the Center of Socioeconomic Development, CSEND. And I will just give you a little bit of her resume. She was born in Taipei, and she also is a Swiss citizen. She holds a doctorate in educational psychology from Indiana University. She's a former associate professor at the Chinese Culture University, Chinese Taipei, and was a postdoctoral fellow at the Columbia University Organizational Psychology. Dr. Yu has over 20 years of experience as an advisor to governments and international organizations.
That's too young a bit.
Organizational development and reform of public administration. She recently directed a 2-year bilateral Swiss-Slovene project to reform the public administration of Slovenia and the 3-year Sino-Swiss bilateral program to modernize management training of senior civil service officials in China. She also has been a consultant to United Nations Development Program and other specialized UN agencies, as well as to the private sector organization. And she directs presently the Geneva Summer Program, Global Leadership Program, since 2015.
You go full speed.
So, Licia, welcome, and then thank you very much. And please take the floor.
Well, thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction, Dr. Tarragone and dear Jean. I would like to also thank you for the opportunity, and also the UNOSD office to give me the opportunity to make this presentation, especially after so many distinguished speakers who did the welcome speech, opening speech, and also keynote speech. So let me share my PowerPoint, and then I could join. Oops. I think somehow, I apologize for being a little bit not so proficient at this moment. And I wonder whether I can get the help from the office to share my screen, because I seem to have problem with my laptop at the moment.
They have a copy.
Yeah, since you have a copy. So Jean, could you help, please?
Just a second.
Thank you. I'm sorry for bothering you. So let me just pick up from where was left off by Mr. Xin in terms of a localized governance structure. And I would like to just retract a little bit and to give a bit of a context. Next, please. I have 4 points to make, but I don't think I need to belabor the point about the need to focus on the city level that has already very clearly elucidated by the previous speaker. But instead, I would like to sort of focus on one challenge, which is about, sort of reaching and collect the data at scale, and also how to ensure the basic principles of SDG and the 2030 agenda will be fulfilled, which is leaving no one behind. Next, please. So that in this context, standardization, from my point of view, is very much the central to our discussion in terms of implementation. So next, please. Just a word of sort of a positive news. We know that it has created a lot of destruction by the ongoing pandemic in the third year. And also, Mr. Liu mentioned that most of the cities have seen 15 to 20% loss of revenue. Nevertheless, IMF seemed to give us a positive news and hint in terms of projections. It's in terms of potential growth in different regions. Next one, please. However, we do know the reality is that such growth is not evenly distributed or shared. So the cities continue with their varied, economic dynamism, the challenges which has already started before the pandemic, and it's ongoing and further exacerbated by the pandemic, is unemployment, the deterioration of our environment, the climate change, and also what we have seen that the rising of inflation and the increasing food insecurity due to a lot of natural disasters, plus potentially man-made disasters. And therefore, the debt for many developing countries is going, even for the developed countries, is also quite substantial. So in this context, what do we need to do? Next, please. I think, let's sort of go back a little bit on the theoretical ground and look at the facts and the experiences. And the new economic geography, which has been launched in 2007 and also sort of by scholars. But of course, this whole school of thought has been started since the 70s. And Krugman could be an important example. And I think what it says to us is that, since 1980, we have seen the dynamism and the locus of economic growth and activities and innovation has shifted from a national level down to cities. So some of the major cities are actually contributing, disproportionately to the national economic growth and development. Next, please. So in this context, let's look at how can governance as a process, next please, to accelerate the achievement of SDG. Why do we consider governance of cities could be sort of such a important driver or accelerator? Is because, if the good governance is there, the potential for the cities could create many more possibilities to tackle some of the most entrenched and pressing problems. And cities at the front line So it's called upon to do more in this particular context. Next one, please. Governance, it is not a noun. It should be considered, a verb. In a way, it's a process of which things are organized, managed, and get done. And of course, it's also related to mobilization of public and private resources to implement them, but without evaluation or tracking or monitoring, such a linear approach is not going to tell us how to proceed, to improve, and to also to learn and to innovate. And therefore, local governance is about moving governance from a target into a process, a management approach. Next one, please. So if we want to sort of track and achieve the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, we need to, as Mr. Xing mentioned, that we need to change our mindset. So what do we need to do next, please? It's really reframing the focus, for build better. But even more importantly, in a lot of countries, back is really not ideal. So, we need to find the ways to build forward better. So let's position leaving no one behind at the city level with participation and transparency through standards. And therefore, indeed, the governance and process data can become pathways to accelerate SDG attainment within the smart cities. Next, please. There are so many difficulties at hand, but as many people like to say and mentioned, disruption could rise to become a great opportunities if we know how to do it and what to do. Next, please. And in this particular context and following this trend of thought, which I think you already seen also with UNDESA's work, Mr. Xing mentioned the role of monitoring and data. And I like to put this forward rather than as a sort of a afterthought, but instead it become one of the major focus of our work. Next, please. SEPA, this 11 principles of good governance has also later on been, here I quoted as AALEP, actually, the correct quote should be Council of Europe. It published principles of good governance at the local level, and also structured accreditation process to see how to identify, to benchmark, the good smart cities who are fulfilling these, principles as a way to show the way for others to, to consider or to learn from. Next one, please. What I would like to do is to highlight, some of the items related to policy making process. As we could see from this flowchart presented here, is if the governance work, then the policy should be able to live up to the expectation and achieve the intended goals or targets. And in this context, there's 4 different steps from initiation to formulation to implementation to evaluation and monitor. And so from our own experience over the last 20 to 30 years of working, that we see ownership by the people, ownership by the stakeholders, and achieving a whole of government approach so that coherence and consistency is really there, not only horizontally, but also between levels, and the policy is actually addressing the most relevant or pressing issues. Then here we can start to see the emerging pattern of higher quality of policy making and good governance at the city level. Next, please. Therefore, in order to achieve this, there's a few quite, sort of supporting or necessary elements need to come into play. One is technology, which is for scaling up Second is sustainability to withhold the inevitable changing of political forces or changing of due to election. And underneath, I think there are a few things that need to be put in place. The first is in order to have scale and in order to have broad-based coverage to allow for, one is oversight, the other is participation, that we need to have the infrastructure and the necessary mechanism to do so. With infrastructure and mechanism, next element and criteria or foundation is transparency, participation, and feedback. The policy regarding how to set up a business, for example, or apply for an export license, what are the procedures? These procedures should be clear. And what are the criteria for qualification? That also need to be clear. We are seeing it through the last 20 years of effort of global transformation from the Millennium Development Goal to the SDGs 2030 agenda. This approach is very evident. And then with the participation, people are giving a voice. So it's not top-down only, but also bottom-up. So that people through participation could get their wishes and needs known. And then providing feedback in terms of what is actually going on as a way to look at progress made and also the distance to target. Based on this effort, once we have the infrastructure, we have greater transparency, participation, and feedback. That is the necessary input for building trust and good governance of citizens in the city area. So our discussion that the last 2 or 3 years saying that we need to have smart and sustainable cities could become a realizable vision rather than remaining as a dream at the far distance. Next, please. And now, to scale, I have already mentioned. We have seen globally and through different seminars and websites, we have seen many wonderful innovations and cases. However, scale remains a problem. The only way that we can scale up to replicate rapidly and broadly these good experiences and continue to learn from them and continue to innovate is we need to adopt technology. So that digital technology is inevitable and has to come into the community. I'm saying and fully recognize the difficulties for many places. Difficulties induced by the lack of basic fundamental infrastructure, such as electricity, such as either the landlines or mobile connectivity. So it makes it difficult to really sort of to put into practice. And therefore that some of the finance for development need to go into this direction sort of as a priority. Once we have the digital capability, it is possible to create common platforms for stakeholder engagement and comparability. And then we can start to think, the analysis, data analysis, and even sort of artificial intelligence as a way to help to enable better decision making. Next, please. The discussion about bringing transparency, participation through digital technology is not meant to displace or replace existing practices. Many of that we have seen have worked before we reached digital age. So it's not a question about replacement, but it's to see that with the technology, there is new possibility to add on to it. Transactions now can be digitized. Data, is generated not only through people's input, but even from the IoT, the Internet of Things, and can be analyzed in new ways to uncover some unknown patterns, to challenge some of our, maybe dearly held beliefs or assumptions. So, so we see that there's a lot of opening with this approach, which we're already seeing from economic side, in terms of tremendous growth. Next, please. So, fine, we can use digital, but we can use platforms to collect information. However, if there's no interoperability to connect and to make it sort of harmonized, the data is not useful because it could not go beyond its own origin, and therefore the need for standardization is pressing and is critical. And the standardization is also a tool for empowerment and engagement of the citizens to be part of the process. Next, please. The urban area, as we have seen, especially some of the mega cities that are very, very diverse, vibrant, diverse, agile, and flexible. And they share some common features, meaning that culturally diverse, value-oriented orientation, also very diverse, tend to be open systems, meaning that new ideas is easy to find, receptive audience, and highly connected within and without. And there are many networks for discussion, for new ideas, for new campaigns. And there's also a fair competition of ideas, goods, and services. And in general, it's a data-rich environment. And all this good stuff could foster creativity and innovation, but also has a flip side. Next, please. The flip side is that there are competition of ideas, of disputes, and sometimes can become so entrenched it becomes, sort of creating a lot of negative impact. For example, we have seen this now in Switzerland, the discussion about vaccine. Should we or should we not have mandatory vaccination? It is becoming a very difficult debate and source of conflict. And therefore, standardization, in a way, is to bring the different branches of the national, the government level, the national level, and the citizen, into some form of dialogue. Next, please. And this dialogue, need to be monitored in order to provide real impact. And one of the things which we could see from the UN's own example is that the whole before the 2030 agenda was adopted and the declaration made in September 2015, there was a huge effort by the UN Secretariat to collect inputs and data from the people, and that materialized into the future that we want. And I think a similar process can be envisioned within at the city level to use standardization by collect data in a systematic, process-oriented manner that we could foster a more rational, evidence-based dialogue rather than based on hearsay through the social media, through the influence of smaller network that has questionable representation value. Next one, please. Standardization supports SDG Goal 11, particularly about making city and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And SDG 16, which is robust and strong and functioning public institutions. Next one, please. So what do I propose at the as the final end? Scanning the work has been done in terms of good governance at the local level. One can find awards, principles. Nevertheless, the process management tool is not as abundant. And here is an ISO standard which applied the quality management system of 9000 into the local administration, local management. And it is visualized or materialized into a standard called 18092. Oh, sorry, I typed a mistake, 18091. And in this case, next one, please. We could see that the different levels of and also different aspects of the practices can be. Sorry, I have a little bit of background noise. Yeah, and this chart is very small, which is difficult to see. However, you will be able to see it online later time. Basically, this particular standards have captured all the 17 goals within the framework and offer a diagnostic tool. So there are altogether 39 indicators and representing the different elements. The beauty of this system, it is flexible and allow for development of sub-indicators fitting the different local context, and so that it could be better utilized locally, but at the same time, because it has a universal nature of the process and what need to be looked at, that can support the SDG 169 indicate 169 targets and the 230 some indicators with more consistent data collection, traceability, and also possibility for tracking improvement of the process. Next, please. So with this, I like to make a short conclusion in terms, the red line across my presentation. Professor Burkhardt and his colleague, Professor van der Waal, has in their research in 2004 mentioned it. Public trust and satisfaction of public services are soft indicators of good governance. Not sufficient, but necessary. And therefore, we need to have ways and tools to capture and to measure public trust and satisfaction with public service. And the ISO standards could do this very well. Standardized, traceable, and transparent operational procedures at the city level lead to open up the space for participation, dialogue, joint problem solving, and better policies. And this, we have seen this, through the private sector's application of quality management system. Accumulation of data due to the sort of the structure for data collection, it supports meta-analysis and institutional memory and impetus for improvement and change transformation. And hopefully this will lead to accelerating the SDG implementation and attainment over time. So with this, I thank you very much and end my presentation. There's some references that if you are interested, can look at. Thank you
very, very much, Alicia, for your presentation. Very interesting. It's always comes to our mind that we say, about the reaching and collect data at scale, but we also sometimes we see that who has access to the data shared. I think that it's very important, but sometimes people even their own personal data is shared and they don't even know this data exists. So it's all, of course, it's one of the issues that also come with this, but it's very interesting to see that we all want to do better governance and how do we track these, not only to talk about it, as you say, as a dream, but also to realize it. So that is a very interesting presentation. I would like to now because we are a bit short of time, so we'll go directly now with Mr. Kazushige Endo, Director of United Nations Center for Regional Development. He will talk about capacity building program for implementation of smart cities for inclusive society in the post-COVID pandemic era. So again, it's also really connected to the two first previous presentations. So Endo-san, please. The mic is
Thank you, John. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Let me start. So my presentation is on the our capacity building program for smart cities. So first I make a presentation on the program and then presentation on what's smart city, etc. So this slide background. So maybe I skip this slide since I talked about the program in the opening remark. So the objective of the program, the Smart City program is expected to contribute SDGs, especially SDG 11, and also synergy with other SDGs listed here. So the outcome of the program is enhancement of sustainable and resilient urbanization and contribution to the implementation SDG 11 and other SDG goals that mentioned in this slide. So the actual activity, we have three activities. So first, the conduct forum, meeting, training, workshop, and also compile the catalog of good practice. And then finally, expand network within UN system and other international organization and local government. So that's the program. So from here, I talk about what is a smart city. So the smart city is a topic nowadays many local governments are interested in. As you know, by 2050, 70% of the world population will live in cities. So the city will confronted with so many social issues. So the the solving such social issues through technology in line with SDGs, that's the concept of a smart city. So you can understand the smart city from 4 perspectives or layers. So the layer of people and layer of digital and the digital of social capital and digital of nature. So the second layer is a key for smart growth. So this is implementation framework for the smart city. The top of the framework is, of course, well-being, sense of happiness. This important issue enhanced by the second layer, digital. And so the foundation includes the social capital and nature. That's, for example, public infrastructure. So then digital will be used for connecting people and connecting infrastructure and nature to enhance well-being. That's the smart city. But the reality is the project implementation will be very, very challenging, but very exciting. So that's why UNCRD started the Smart City program. So the first priority of Smart City, the people are most interested in. So this is the result of the questionnaire to the public. So first priority here, disaster prevention and mitigation, and the second, services for the elderly, and then service for children and transportation enhancement of healthcare. Those are the priority of smart city people are expecting. So this slide is explaining the smart city model project, financed and implemented by the Japanese government. So the model project initiated by Japan is a sector approach. So the smart city cover the wide range of the sector, but maybe first step better to focus, some specific sector. So the Japanese government selected 15 project of the smart city initiative. So then this will lead other governments. And so this also the explanation what the Japanese government actually the financier of this program. They supported smart city by creating business opportunities and by facilitating data sharing among project stakeholders. So here the three pillars of the Japanese Smart City Initiative. The first one is the Eco City. That's the famous pilot project is the Kitakyushu City, or transit-oriented development. That's also famous for the Yokohama Ocean Port Development is famous for this category, and resilient city. Those are the three pillars of smart city. So then there is an international collaboration mechanism between ASEAN countries and the Japanese government. Maybe that can be useful for us and useful for participants today in the International Mayors Forum. So this is how the UNCRD facilitate the smart city development. Actually, we are kind of a platform connecting countries and cities and projects, local government, and international organization. Yeah, we like to facilitate collaboration in Asia and among the world. So this is a kind of illustration for understanding the urban challenges, urban issues, which can be addressed through smart city development. That's we believe. So finally, this is a kind of additional slide because the next session will be discussing volunteer local reviews, and I think Amazon Sibanda from UNDESA discussed. So UNCRD released handbook of SDGs monitoring and evaluation tools for local government. So this is the tool for the implementation of SDGs at the local level. We are very happy to work for you with use of this tool. It's also maybe useful for mayors and the local government, the participants today. So that's all my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to you, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Endo-san, for your presentations. As you have seen, this is very connected. The three presentations together, we see that like the smart cities, basically, they are an instrument for the whole government approach. So that's another supporting effective institution for SDG localization. They could be also at other level. I was wondering, there was a question, but I think it was responded. I mean, so what is the main challenge for local government to achieve digital transformation? There was a response for that was made on the chat. I don't know if some of the three presenters, they want to add something else to this question. I don't know if you saw it on the chat box. The response was goal setting and strategy alignment, budget, funding, and priority setting, implementation, outboarding and digital culture, external communication. So I don't know if you want to raise other issues or like the main challenge for local government to achieve this digital transformation. Incheon, you want to say something?
Yes. Thinking about digitization, just referring to a work that I recently did was about, how to enhance or promote adaptation of digital technologies. And we know that it has advanced greatly. However, the challenges for many countries and also cities in these countries remain the same. And I have briefly have briefly mentioned, it is, the lack of infrastructure. We should not forget the digital divide remains similar. Pretty much, still the same place. About 3.5 billion of the world population are not connected. And so when we talk about, connectivity in the context of leaving no one behind as an instrument for facilitate better governance or good governance and also better public services delivery, we need to find a way to overcome this. Therefore, while digital means might not be available in the cities, thinking about some of the very large poorest cities and also remote settlements, and I think we need to go back to more traditional means of creating, human connection and engagement. And this, I think, it's going to be operationally a challenging things to do. Second thing I would also like to say, even in the developed world, while the connectivity infrastructure might not be an issue, nevertheless, digital literacy remains a challenge for particular groups, such as for older people, also, to some extent, women also are disadvantaged, and also the remote areas, not because the infrastructure is not available in terms of connectivity through mobile means also, but it's affordability. So I think when we look at wanting to use digital infrastructure as the backbone to ensure participation, to ensure service delivery, especially in the post-pandemic era, we have to put this much higher on the agenda and start to ask ourselves the questions, how to find ways to make the trade-off so that investment can be made. I think here I want to third point I want to make is to say the urban-rural divide is a very serious challenge. And still today, about a little bit more than 50% of the world population lives in the urban center. The rest are still in the rural area. And if we do not somehow equalizing this digital availability, what we will see is that by 2050, we will not be only 70% of the population, or a little less than 70% of the population will be in urban areas, but more, because there's no other opportunities to engage, for livelihood, for development, and for a little bit sort of financial security. So I think here we need to really spend some time to think about what does it mean in terms of this digital divide, and how would that put more pressure on the cities to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Licha. Endo-san, you want to add something to that?
Thank you very much. There are many questions coming, and appreciate. Actually, what I like to mention, one thing, the challenge for smart city is the collaboration mechanism between the public sector and the private sector and the community. So there are so many innovative technology, since it's 5 generation of information technology. started around the globe. So we need more technology for realizing smart city development. So maybe the previous development, sustainable development is a little bit different from smart city. Since you know this is a digital, you know, very difficult to see, you know, what we have, you know, in the cloud. On the other hand, we have to make sure the collaboration is effective between public and the private and the community, but it's not invisible, but very, very important for make a success on this smart city development. So maybe that's the challenge for the digital governance and smart city. Yeah, I think that's my comment.
Thank you very much. I see that, Bokyum, you want to add something.
Yeah, I just from the point of governance aspect, I'd like to add one more thing. From the governance aspect, 3 dimensions I'd like to highlight. The 3 is the people, process, system. For the system, already she said about the infrastructure. The infrastructure, not only the infrastructure, institutional arrangements, legal framework should back up the digital transformation, and also the finance should back up the digital transformation. Not only in the system, all the for digital transformation, all the things and the data should be connected and shared, and they should be analyzed, and should create the values and jobs. Those kind of process should be activated for the connectivity. And the people should have the ownership and awareness of this aspect. They can leave the digital transformation matters to the digital department. Not only the digital department, all the departments should be engaged in the digital transformation process. So all the government officials should have the ownership, to take the ownership, and their capacity should be developed for the digital transformation. So those kind of people, process, system aspect I'd like to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the 3 of you. That was very interesting. I hope we can have time at the end to add something, because it's really related to also what's the next presenters. So maybe you can join at the end. Now I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Anson Sibanda, Chief of the National Strategies and Capacity Building Branch, the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York. So Mr. Anson Sibanda has over 15 years of progressively responsible broad range of sustainable development issues at the global, regional, and national levels, including the various intergovernmental processes that underpin his work. Mr. Sibanda holds a doctorate and a master's in demography from the University of Pennsylvania, and a master in science and population studies, and a baccalaureate in geography from the University of Zimbabwe. So Anson, I think I saw you online, so I think you could take the mics. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Jean. Let me share my screen. Okay, thanks, Jan, for inviting us to participate in this year's International Mayors Forum, which is becoming a very interesting forum for us to share ideas of what is happening. And I've been invited today to talk about local and regional implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, an introduction to the voluntary local reviews. So some of the things that I might say you probably have been covered by the previous speakers. But before I talk about what voluntary local reviews, I think the main purpose of this Mayors Forum is to assess progress in implementing the SDGs and what we can do as local authorities. So basically, I think when we look at the SDGs, the COVID-19 pandemic has indeed undermined decades of development efforts and has set back the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs everywhere. The human, economic, and social toll of the pandemic has been devastating, as underscored by rising poverty levels, hunger, inequality, job losses, and of course now we are all dealing with the effects of rising inflation. The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed to the brink our healthcare systems, undermining the progress that we made on several health-related SDGs. And of course, we also have the impacts of a changing climate that are placing the SDGs further out of reach around the world. So what are voluntary local reviews? First, for us to understand the voluntary local reviews, maybe we need to start with the voluntary national reviews, which are basically a process that measures what progress countries are making when it comes to implementing the 23rd Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. So related to that, voluntary local reviews can simply be defined as something that a process that measures progress on the SDGs at local and subnational levels and are about engaging citizens into local action. They are a valuable source of feedback, information, and data for the voluntary national review processes. Of course, voluntary local reviews are not officially part of the high-level political forum, but nonetheless, they've been discussed in the negotiations of the high-level political forum as a useful tool for increasing local commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Cities and regions are also represented at the annual local and regional governments forum that DESA organizes during the HLPF. We are also seeing a growing number of cities and local authorities undertaking these voluntary local reviews. For instance, in 2021, the countries that reported on the voluntary national reviews did refer to voluntary local and voluntary subnational reviews in several countries. This include Indonesia, Mexico, and Zimbabwe. If you look at Sweden, it is submitted officially 4 voluntary local reviews from several cities like Stockholm and Uppsala. We just concluded about a week or 2 ago a capacity building workshop in the Gambia in West Africa, where they would like to do a voluntary national review as well as voluntary local reviews in about 4 local authorities. And of course, several cities around the world have also undertaken voluntary local reviews. This includes New York City, Cape Town, Harare, Victoria Falls, Suwon in the Republic of Korea, Shinokawa and Toyama in Japan, and Kaohsiung in the Philippines. If you follow the work of the Venice City Solutions initiative, you can also find that there are so many cities that are using voluntary local reviews basically to monitor SDG implementation around the world. So because of the growing interest in voluntary local reviews, we at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs decided to put together what we call global guiding elements for voluntary local reviews. Basically, it's a roadmap to help countries think through how they can implement these local reviews. So the voluntary local review guidelines that we have draw from the Secretary General's Common Voluntary Guidelines for the voluntary national reviews. They provide a proposed shared structure for the reports, and at a minimum give a checklist of issues that could be reflected in the process. They are fully compatible with other more detailed guidance documents. I think we are going to hear some of those guiding documents that have been prepared by the Economic Commission for Africa, and as well as the ESCAP and UN Habitat. So there are a lot of guidelines that have also been put together by UN system agencies that go into detail how countries can or local authorities can conduct their voluntary local reviews. At the end of the day, they all aim at fostering a dialogue between the voluntary national reviews and the voluntary local reviews where applicable. So we need to discuss also how do these local reviews connect with the voluntary national reviews. As I said, the local reviews provide a valuable source of feedback, information, and data for the voluntary national review processes. They do contribute to fostering policy coherence and coordination among national and local efforts. They enhance stakeholder engagement and awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals at the subnational level. And of course, they do amplify the voices of the poor and people living in vulnerable situations and help in ensuring that no one is left behind. They can also highlight innovative local resource mobilization solutions that might be missed at the national level. So as my colleague Bakune has said, many of the 2030 Agenda's 169 targets rely on contributions and responsibilities of local and subnational governance. I think he had indicated about close to 70 or so targets pretty much are supposed to be implemented at the local level. Cities and local governments are providers, as we know, of basic public goods and services. This includes affordable housing, quality healthcare and education, food systems, clean water and sanitation. Hence, they do play an important role in delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals. And voluntary local reviews do provide a fuller picture of SDG implementation and the challenges that countries and societies face. Subnational governments also have an important role when it comes to local resource mobilization. As we know, in some countries, the mobilization of property taxes is done at the local level. But another important advantage of having a local review is that they showcase and bring forward unique but scalable local solutions to development challenges at the national level. So in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, so why is localizing SDGs important? We believe that with 8 years left to achieve the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, countries must build back better and find ways to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. There's no other option. But one effective way to accelerate the implementation and to fast-track progress is to mobilize subnational, regional, or local governments to pursue SDGs at their level. SDG localization has been increasingly recognized as a strong driver of the 2030 Agenda, including by the High-Level Political Forum. And scaling up SDG localization requires system-wide alignment, enhanced local governance, and multi-stakeholder and partnership collaboration. To quote from the Ministerial Declaration of the 2021 High-Level Political Forum, they do underscore the importance of, as I said, of local reviews. To quote, they say, "We commit to involving and empowering local authorities to ensure local ownership of SDGs, in particular by citizens, community and local organizations, and to best translate national development priorities into local realities, and in this regard, note voluntary local reviews as a useful tool to show progress and foster exchange in local implementation of the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals." I think politically it's very important that we have the High-Level Political Forum putting its weight behind the voluntary local reviews. So scaling up SDG localization, what do we mean by that? Basically, it requires developing effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels and ensuring more responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making processes. Again, these are elements that my colleague Bakyun touched on, and some of these elements are part of the SEPA principles. Localizing SDGs also requires system-wide alignment, enhanced local governance, and multi-stakeholder and partnership collaboration. But obviously, while we are celebrating the increase that we see in localizing SDGs, there are barriers that exist to localizing the SDGs. And it is important for local authorities to pay attention to these barriers and to find out ways to overcome them. These include inadequate local capacity and financial resources, lack of policy coherence and coordination among national and local efforts. So we need to improve the way governments work as they relate to local authorities. Of course, there's the old age problem of lack of disaggregated data and capacities to perform subnational monitoring and evaluation. And lastly, of course, but not last problem or barrier that we have, there is limited awareness of the SDGs and stakeholder consultations at the subnational levels. And these are some of the areas where we think if we can tackle some of these barriers, we can see the growth of voluntary local reviews by making sure that at least we succeed in implementing the 2030 agenda. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Anson, for your very comprehensive presentation. This is really, really interesting. It's good to hear about, how the VLR are fitting with the VNRs, and then they're getting more space and more attention, also drawing more attention every year. So I saw that, you talk about Suwon City you have presented. Tomorrow we'll have the mayor, just a small announcement. The mayor of Suwon City will be at the session tomorrow. Thank you very much. And now I would like to go with the next presenters. So we have Ms. Edlan Abeda Yeneru. She's Chief Urbanization Section, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, which is what she used to be, and now she's currently Director at interim of the Gender, Poverty and Social Policy Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, ECA. In this capacity, she leads the delivery of knowledge and technical advisory support to African countries on policies to eradicate extreme poverty and reduce inequality, promote gender equality and women's empowerment, and foster sustainable urbanization. She's also been leading this urbanization development section I was talking about to advance the policy and practice to leverage Africa's urban transition for inclusive growth since 2015. Previously, she held positions at UN Habitat, where we were colleagues, and also at UNOSD, where she led a number of normative and operational programs in academic research and research institutes, including Addis Ababa University, University College London, and University of Sussex. She also Master Philosophy in Development Studies from the University of Cambridge and a PhD Human Geography from the University of London. Ms. Yemeru, I think you are here online if you want to speak.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We hear you fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the invitation and for bringing ECA into this conversation. All the organizers of this event, we appreciate this opportunity to be here with you. Of course, this forum is happening in the context of COVID, and it becomes really important and relevant to consider the role of cities, local governments, as well as mayors, and we are happy to be part of this conversation. Our brief session to be covered by myself and my colleague Lusungu will focus on some few reflections on voluntary local reviews in the Africa region. And I will be very brief, but Lusungu will be the one that provides a slightly more detailed presentation on what we are doing in our region. My sincere apologies, I could not join you before this session due to prior commitments. So obviously, we're having this conversation in the context of COVID, and so COVID-19 becomes a really core and critical anchor to most of the things that we are discussing currently, be it at the global level, but particularly also in the Africa region, as is very well known to many of you here. The impacts of the pandemic have been particularly severe in the African context, not just in terms of health, but even more so in terms of the economic effects that COVID-19 has had on our countries, on our governments, communities, and households as well. We have seen growth plummeting dramatically in 2020, but we saw some level of recovery in 2021. But we're still facing the economic growth consequences, the effect on our economic growth in the region. So as I said, in 2020, we saw our regional GDP growth rate contract by 3%, which is really quite substantial, and we saw it rising to 3.1% or so in 2021. Of course, unemployment soared like it did in other parts of the world, but it becomes particularly severe in a context where most employment is actually in the informal sector. We also saw about millions of people falling under extreme poverty lines. Up to 55 million people by ECA's estimates fell into poverty due to the pandemic. Of course, the other major impact was on government finances, which were drained with the additional expenses that came with COVID-19, including the emergency and immediate health responses, some of the social protection mechanisms that had to be put in place. And this was happening in a context of high debt. And therefore, this led to a serious liquidity crisis in the region. So in this broader context of COVID-19, which is really a top priority for us in the continent currently, we begin to once again see that cities and local governments are at the core of Africa's development agenda, both Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. So it's clear that COVID is once again showing the importance of cities and local governments. And I think the broader message for us, at least in the Africa region, when it comes to cities and local governments, is that COVID-19 recovery strategies and financing needs to really place cities and local governments at the core. When we look at some of the priority areas for COVID-19 recovery in the Africa region, it's clear that cities and local governments and mayors have a central role to play in that. I'll give some examples. For instance, when it comes to mobilizing resources for financing recovery and even for financing development more broadly, cities and local governments have a strong role to play, particularly in terms of boosting domestic resource mobilization in Africa. There are substantial untapped revenues at the local level, as we know, which we must begin to tap into more systematically through strengthened local economies and strengthened local governments as well. Related to this, when we think about the fiscal performance of national economies in Africa currently, which are really struggling with the impacts of COVID-19, cities and local governments, again, have a strong role to play. Because when we think about fiscal performance and fiscal stability, it's not just a national agenda, it's definitely also a local agenda and really requires a strong response at the local level. Again, when we think about productive job creation, which has become once again a central agenda in Africa in the context of COVID-19, productive jobs are in cities. Productive jobs are linked to urban economies. And so we see that once again, cities and local governments become really important in this context. So really the big message here is that we need to bring cities and local governments, subnational governments into really the center of COVID-19 recovery strategies and responses in the African context. And so voluntary local reviews are a very strong tool and entry point for advocating for cities and subnational governments, local governments in Africa to play a much more central role in Africa's development agenda, be it Agenda 2063 or Agenda 2030. And so we see it as really a strategic and unique entry point to advance this position, this message, and really bring in local governments and cities into the development agenda. So I'll stop there, and I will hand it over to Lusungu, who will speak more to the details of what we're doing on voluntary local reviews and why we feel that it's really an important mechanism for strengthening the local dimension of development in Africa. So I'll stop there. Lusungu, over to you.
Thank you, Edlam. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Again, my name is Lusungu. I've been working with ECU last year, and I'm pleased to be presenting the regional guidelines that we've been working on. Let me share my screen. Okay, so here's just an outline of my presentation. We'll start quickly with just the state of SDG implementation in Africa and why the Africa guideline was prepared for the region. Before I discuss our methodology on how we came about to prepare the guideline, what we reviewed, what resources we relied upon, and then we will look at the guideline, the content of the guideline itself, the process and the template that's been developed, and I'll wrap up with next steps. Now, in Africa, in thinking about the SDGs and where we stand in the region, there has been some progress, but as mentioned by previous colleagues, we're seeing stagnation across a number of goals, particularly in goals 1, 3, 7, 9, and we're even seeing reversal in some achievements, as we can see in goal 16 around peace, justice, and strong institutions. On this slide here, we can also see that a number of indicators are also moving in the wrong direction. Of the 244 total indicators in the SDGs, only 81 actually have enough data for progress to be measured in the Africa region. And 77 of all indicators have absolutely no data. And as mentioned by Amson and other colleagues, disaggregated data on indicators still remains a huge challenge. Edlam has gone over the impacts of COVID-19 on the region. We are in the midst of a global economic and humanitarian crisis, and there are immediate and long-term impacts being felt across the board. Progress, as I mentioned, that we have seen is at risk of further slowing down or being reversed completely. Now, the World Bank estimated in 2021 that the consequences of the pandemic could push an additional 60 million people into extreme poverty worldwide. 40% of this is in the Africa region, where 23 million people are at risk of food insecurity. And an estimated 110 million children and youth have been out of school. The fragile healthcare systems that are in the region have been tested beyond measure. And there's been an observed increase in domestic violence as well, especially amongst women and girls. But it's also important to mention that while the global pandemic has presented these challenges, it has also catalyzed swift action at both the national and the local levels. We've seen many states in the process of reprioritizing goals and programs and activities to respond to the crises they're facing. Even we've seen schools and governments go online and make sure that there's no pause in the work that needs to be carried out. So there's been a high level of innovation in the face of extreme challenge. I won't go into this too much because this was covered by my colleague, Amson. But I just wanted to reiterate some points that were made about the power of the voluntary local review as a tool, As a significant portion of the SDGs are implemented at the local level, local actors are extremely important. And the process of preparing the local review, it can lead to strengthened coordination across municipal departments and improve overall administration. In Africa and other regions, this has led to data sharing opportunities, as well as a shared language on local vision and local priorities. So again, I'm not going to get into this too much. I believe this was sufficiently covered in the last presentation. And given the strength of the voluntary local review, and how it's been seen in the region and elsewhere, we've seen an increase in momentum in the number of VLRs produced in the region. So far, we've had 9 published, this includes 4 counties in Kenya, Busia, Kwale, Marsabit, and Taita Taveta. And we saw Accra in Ghana, Harare, and Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, Gora District and Yaoundé, and these recently published VLRs are available on UNECA's website for viewing. In the pipeline, we're working with 3 localities in the Gambia, including Brikama, Kanifing, and Kontour. As mentioned before, Cape Town is in the process of also producing a voluntary local review, as well as Brazzaville, and 2 localities in Benin and 3 localities in Zimbabwe yet to be identified will also be committing to publishing VLRs in the next short while. So now we will dive into the reasons behind why an Africa VLR guideline was deemed necessary. In the next few slides, we will look at some of the main reasons why the guidelines were needed, and these are all highlighted in Chapter 1 of our Africa Regional Guidelines. The first here is the member states requested the UN system to prepare the Africa Voluntary Local Review Guidelines. Discussions from the Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development in 2020 highlighted the role of voluntary local reviews in accelerating the implementation, follow-up, and review of Agenda 2063, which is something I'll get to in a few slides, as well as Agenda 2030. And in these discussions, it was noted that VLRs have particular strength in ensuring that the SDG agenda has local ownership, accountability, and commitment from all stakeholders. And it has the ability to promote meaningful engagement and mobilization of resources and capacity. And due to this, as I mentioned, a specific request came from member states to the UN body to design a template that could be peer-reviewed and standardized for increased production of VLRs in the region, and to ensure that this template is aligned with voluntary national reviews. Second of all, the contextual specificity. As mentioned by speakers, there are strong rural-urban linkages in the region and elsewhere. The region also faces a high urban growth rate, yet most of the continent's urbanization has yet to take place, which means there are a number of non-urban localities which will also be producing local reviews. It's necessary for a standard guideline and template to help ensure that there's coherence and peer review, opportunities for peer review and learning amongst localities facing similar challenges that are in the thrust of a demographic transition and urban transition as the region is facing. So these guidelines really speak to localities starting from scratch and provide useful tools and examples to get them started. Number 3 is the regional specificities of Agenda 2063. Now, I mentioned the region is implementing not only Agenda 2030, but Agenda 2063. Prior to the adoption of Agenda 2030, African Union, heads of state and government adopted the Agenda 2063, which is a shared strategic framework for inclusive growth and sustainable development for the region. This was in January 2015. The Agenda 2063 was developed through a people-driven process, and it took 18 months of extensive consultations with all parts of African society. The agenda is based on 7 aspirations that are centered around socioeconomic development, culture, democratic governance, peace and security, inclusive society, and youth. And the SDGs and Agenda 2063, in addition to these 2 agendas, the region is also committed to other frameworks, such as harmonized regional framework for the New Urban Agenda and the Africa Common Position on Habitat 3. So to facilitate reductions in poverty and inequality and to achieve more inclusive, peaceful, and stable states, the region must really harness the potential of its urban dividend, and these frameworks provide the structure for doing so. So it was important that the guidelines took these other frameworks, especially Agenda 2063, into account in providing the right tools for localities to think about how they're perhaps meeting the goals of the SDGs or Agenda 2063. Fourth, there's a need to accelerate progress in the region. While there has been some progress, as I've mentioned, the region is not on track to meeting Agenda 2030 nor the aspirations of Agenda 2063. There could be some enhanced alignment between national and subnational government frameworks. And as we've seen, a number of subnational governments are interested in conducting a local review. So our guidelines offer a place for local governments to start. And many are in some stage of localizing the SDGs and aligning them to their local plans and strategies. And this process of preparing a local review is helping to further this process and hopefully spur for the production of VLRs in the region. The 5th reason behind why these guidelines were prepared were to accelerate the production of VLRs overall. I did say that we have a few published in the region, but we could have many more. And as VLRs are emerging as this inclusive and participatory instrument for collaboration, it's even more important to highlight that they are a tool for communicating and spearheading dialogue across government with local actors, including grassroots institutions and citizens. Last but not least, the guidelines also promote peer review. They are, we've incorporated a peer review checklist within the guidelines to help during each phase of the preparation of voluntary local review, to have local governments have an opportunity to share where they are, how they're learning, what lessons they're taking away, and to work with localities that have published VLRs in the past and those who are wishing to publish VLRs. So we're hoping to use the VLR process as a means to exchange ideas and to really get dialogue going in the region. So the methodology we applied in preparing the guidelines, we fully considered other handbooks and guiding principles such as DESAs that were presented before. We also looked at English voluntary local reviews that were written in English that were publicly available. And we tried to summarize and draw upon the best practices of these tools. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, but just to summarize, some of the best case examples and include these in just one comprehensive set of guidelines. This guideline, I should also mention, has been prepared through a partnership between UNECA, UN Habitat, and UCLG Africa. And these are just some of the materials we looked at. We looked at global UN resources, non-global, regional, national, and also resources that have been prepared at the subnational level, such as the Shimokawa method, also the University of Bristol prepared VLR for handbook for UK cities. So we really drew upon the existing resources at the time and Many more have probably been published since, and I'm sure many more will be published after this. And that's really important because they are tailored to the local context, which is what we try to do with the Africa's VLR guidelines. And the methodology we applied was to create something that was simple, easy to follow, offered best practices, and also had a series of guiding questions in each section to allow for reflection. This image here just gives a quick overview of the 3 distinct phases that we've established in the guidelines, that we've created in the guidelines. We've established 3 phases in terms of preparation, and each of these phases is guided by ongoing peer review and stakeholder engagement. And I'll get into these phases just in the next couple of slides quickly, as my time is running out. But before I do, I just wanted to mention that we've included a few guiding principles just to get localities started. And I've only put a few here, I've highlighted a few here on the slide. I think a lot of this has been mentioned already in some capacity throughout this meeting, but the important thing, VLRs are an opportunity for local governments to just establish where they are. It's a starting point. You know, VLRs are a tool for monitoring and measuring progress, but they are also a mechanism for planning local action. And VLRs are a tool for telling your local story. So it's important not to compare with what others have been producing, but to think about where are we starting, what are our local priorities, where are we seeing progress in our implementation, where are we facing challenges, and how can we highlight this, how can we communicate this in our voluntary local review, and how can we bring our stakeholders together to tell that story, that joint story. And as I've mentioned, VLRs represent a process. It's not just a product. And it's a process that should be engaging, participatory, and is not really bound by defined start and end dates. The VLRs are a living tool that should be updated as often as needed. So phase 1, just quickly, in the guidelines, we started with the preparatory work that goes into conducting a review. The guidelines here provide some direction on where to get started. And the first phase is marked by key outputs such as SDG alignment, creation of a stakeholder engagement plan, selection of models for institutional collaboration, and also preparation of a roadmap and detailed work plan for getting started. In the guidelines in our annex, we've provided mapping tools to help localities link their local frameworks and strategies with existing policies and the SDGs and Agenda 2063, as well as conduct policy and program gap analysis to better understand where progress is being made. A number of local frameworks and plans, such as city development strategies and sustainability frameworks, have been designed, updated, or are being revised to better align to the SDG framework. Phase 2 of the guidelines covers the data collection, analysis, and write-up, as well as the publication of the VLR. You know, we've talked about how data is key to a successful VLR. So the template does provide examples of how localities are working with their national statistics offices, and also how they're working to find local program data sets or data from individual stakeholders. And there are some suggestions on how to further disaggregate data and to visualize data. So it's easier to understand across stakeholders. More than anything, the guideline tries to inspire this participatory process of data collection that's bolstered by partnerships, either those existing or those that may emerge through the process of preparing a voluntary local review. And beyond data, this template also offers guidance on whether localities wish to conduct a review of all 17 SDGs or specific SDGs that are tailored to local priorities. The third part of the template is the monitoring and review and the integration and follow-up after the VLR is completed. In this area, the subnational governments are given some guidance around how as I was mentioning, VLRs are a dynamic tool, and they can detail concrete follow-up steps and identify areas for implementation and actions going forward post VLR production. And also this gives a space for developing a monitoring strategy, which may involve the establishment of a website, a dashboard, or online platform that can be used by all stakeholders to monitor and track progress. Now, just in terms of next steps, ECA is in the final stages of finalizing the guidelines. We are just wrapping up the design and the layout, and that will fully be launched soon. We're working on the next round of VLRs. We're working together with partners to develop some online training tools and disseminating the webinar, the guideline through webinars, and also bringing the elements of the guidelines to tailored trainings for specific local governments, such as the workshop we had with the 3 localities in Gambia just a couple of weeks back. So this is where we stand at this point, and I thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adlam and Ms. Sindasanga, for your presentation. Mr. Chang-Gyun is having a little technical issue, so I'll be taking over briefly from now on. If the audience have any questions to the speakers, please leave them in the chat box. And we'll move on to the next presentation. The next presentation will be about the country and city experience of Yokohama, specifically Country Local Review 2021 Yokohama. This will be delivered by the Honorable Mr. Takeharu Yamanaka through video message. He is the mayor of the city of Yokohama, and he was elected the mayor of the city of Yokohama in August 2021. Prior to his appointment as mayor, his past appointments include Dean of the Graduate School of Data Science, Yokohama City University, and Department Manager at National Cancer Center, Japan. The video message of Mr. Takeharu Yamanaka will be followed by Mr. Ken Akaoka. He's the Director General for the Global Network of the City of Yokohama, New York office. He assumed the positions of Director General for the Global Network, International Affairs Bureau, and Executive Director, Office of the City of Yokohama Representative to the Americas in April 2021. Prior to this, he served as the Director General of International Affairs Bureau and held other management positions in the fields of international affairs, tourism, and convention promotion. So without further ado, I'm going to play the video message of the mayor of the city of Yokohama.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be invited to participate in the International Mayors Forum. Cities are currently home to more than half of the world population and produce around 80% of its GDP. Cities, therefore, play an increasingly crucial role in achieving the SDGs. To meet these expectations, as the largest municipality in Japan and SDGs future city designated by the national government, the city of Yokohama issued our first VLR last year. The VLR is a framework to review the progress of our efforts to help achieve the SDGs and share our findings with the international community. We believe there are 3 essential aspects to VLR. First, the process of conducting a VLR itself presents considerable value. Reassessing our SDGs efforts provides the opportunity to develop even better urban initiatives. VLR also function as a communication tool for sharing experience and knowledge among cities, a medium to share each city's systems and know-how can help effectively achieve the SDGs around the world. Finally, as cities, we can assume a leadership role in launching a global movement by committing to a VLR. Cities will play an essential role to achieve the SDGs, and we need more cities to commit. We're touring a cascade of city voices and actions throughout the world. Yokohama unveiled its VLR last October at the 10th Asia Smart City Conference. It was a great opportunity to share Yokohama's VLR with a global audience. During the closing session of the conference, we presented the Yokohama Declaration to clearly state that VLR is expected to serve as a framework for supporting sustainable urban development. Yokohama engages in international cooperation through public-private partnership through its YPOD program. It aims to help address urban issues faced by cities in Southeast Asia. Through this program, the City of Yokohama has supported projects in a variety of fields to address urban issues in emerging countries. It has helped install a plastic recycling plant in Cebu, the Philippines, and introduce high-efficiency pumps at waterworks facilities in Da Nang, Vietnam. I believe the recent announcement of Yokohama's VLR represents a symbolic milestone. We will further step up our effort to contribute to sustainable urban development across the entire global community. As a leader of a city home to over 3.77 million people, I will continue to work together with our diverse partners and strive to help achieve the global SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all remain committed to accelerating these critical efforts together. I will now ask the Director General for the Global Network of the City of Yokohama, New York office, Mr. Ken Akaoka, to share a few words about Yokohama's SDGs initiatives in more detail. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Ken Akaoka, if you could start your presentation, we will appreciate it.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Darion. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting us to this meaningful forum. I'm in charge of Yokohama's international partnership and currently stationed in our New York office to represent Yokohama in the North and South America. I'd like to go into detail about Yokohama's effort toward the sustainable development goals or SDGs and views on the voluntary local review or VLR. Mayor Yamanaka pointed out three aspects of the VLR. VLR as a city management process, VLR as a communication tool, and VLR as a global move. In other words, we can use VLR to verify SDGs progress and improve future policy making. we can share the know-how we develop to contribute to global solutions. And the hope is that VLRs can help disseminate local voices and actions to the world. I believe all of you participating in this forum are tackling environmental programs and incorporating the SDGs into your own cities. And I think VLRs could act as a milestone of your current efforts, as well as help you develop a process localizing the SDGs. First off, it is important to develop an internal momentum to start a VLR, because at the moment, I think there are many people who understand the need for SDGs, but don't know about the VLR. What was fortunate for Yokohama is that we had direct opportunities to learn about VLRs from experienced cities. Yokohama is a member of the SDGs Leadership Cities Network, a network of cities initiated and managed by the Brookings Institute to promote local SDGs. Many of the members had already undertaken the creation of a VLR, so we deepened our understanding of what a VLR is and why we should launch one through the conversation with those vanguard cities. Also in 2019, New York City launched the VLR Declaration Initiatives, which encourage cities around the world to commit to VLR. NYC believed that VLR movement should grow, recognizing the importance of getting cities of all sizes and regions to collaborate, combine the collective power of the global stage. Yokohama echoed NYC's idea and co-signed the VLR declaration. Though the creation of VLRs is not the official process defined in the 2030 agenda, practices have been established by preceding cities. So some guidelines of the VLRs have been developed thanks to the efforts of the United Nations vanguard entities. We especially reference the guidelines proposed by UNOSD and the UNSCRD, shown here, to understand the establishment framework, the VLR. The next topic I'd like to focus on is Yokohama's internal environment of promoting the SDGs. The city of Yokohama are conscious of the SDGs in all measures, and in 2018, it formulated a strategy called the Medium-Term 4-Year Plan with the SDGs in mind. In parallel with that, the Japanese government developed a system to select cities around the country to work toward the SDGs, according then SDGs future cities. Yokohama was selected as one of these SDG cities, future cities that same year in 2018. In Yokohama's case, the process of implementing and reviewing the midterm 4-year plan and the SDGs future city plan we developed for the future city program both led our first VLR. Let me skip some slides. Mapping. The first thing we did to promote the SDGs in our city was to map and align the city policy agenda with the SDGs. Many other proceeding cities have conducted mapping goals too. Mapping is, I think, like translation to change our own language into own language of SDGs. Because of the global indicators of the SDGs are not always applicable to local level, Yokohama City developed local key performance indicators applicable to the challenges we face and related to the global goals. And we made a mechanism to review the progress of those indicators regularly every year based on the midterm 4-year plan we have developed. I know I just said that it is not easy to apply the global indicators to cities, but it might have been easier for us to than most because we actually had some help. Working group of the Japanese government created a local indicators list based on the global indicators. This SDGs local index list has common indicators in which the global indicators are divided into those that address specific regional programs in Japan. And in Yokohama's VLR report, we summarize the baselines of Yokohama's status according to these indicators in the appendix. And it forms the most purely data-intensive part of VLR. Spotlight. The Yokohama SDGs Design Center was established and operated by jointly by the city of Yokohama and the private sectors, and runs a project connected new tech to regional issues. To the right, the YSDG certification system support SMEs and others focused on the SDGs on the financing and private procurement. This is actually another initiative the SDGs Design Center is operating. This certification is expected to be able to be used as important non-financial information and evaluation by financial institutions. To the right under, last year, all citizens in Japan are covered by the medical insurance system. Though this is technically a system of the government of Japan, which is carried out by the municipal as they're implemented, we highlighted this universal health coverage in a VLR because it has been more important than ever in the COVID-19 era, and it is one of the important global targets of the SDGs target 3.8. Internal cooperation. Many countries and cities are making efforts to achieve the SDGs, but unfortunately, the progress worldwide has been slow, which was pointed out in the 2019 SDGs Summit Political Declaration. In the 1950s and 60s, the city of Yokohama faced various urbanization problems such as waste issue, traffic congestion, and more. Based on the technology and know-how gained from solving these problems, Yokohama City started the Whiteboard program, which will work to solve urban problems that occur now in developing and emerging cities in Southeast Asia and the rest of the world. The problem we seek to solve through the Whiteboard program are deeply related the SDGs. We are now expecting that our joint efforts with our partner cities could lead to VLRs in those cities because it is important to monitor and review the program's progress. And these cities could reflect that into their own VLRs. Ultimately, we hope we can help partner cities develop their own VLRs as well as help solve the problem they face. Last but not least, let me emphasize the importance of acting as a mover and being active in our support of the VLR and SDGs, including this forum. We are currently working to expand a global network and taking opportunities to exchange ideas and learn from others to confront together global challenges we all face living on this planet. If you would like to know more about Yokohama's VLR and other initiatives, please visit the global website from this QR code. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akaoka, Director General for the Global Network of the City of Yokohama at the New York office. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I was a bit offline for some time, so I've had a problem with connection, although I'm really well connected, but I don't understand what happened. And I let go a little bit for the other presenters a bit beyond the time, so we don't have much time for the questions. But among the, I don't see questions in the chat box. However, I will ask the presenters if you have questions for your colleagues. So if someone wants to talk, that was very interesting to see, the different ways, difficulties, the challenge. You talked about the challenge to apply the global indicators. So everyone is working, trying to fit the right indicators together, different tools to assess at the city level, the SDG localization. It is very interesting. So I wonder if I see Licia, you want to say something. So maybe I'll let speak, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jean. I wanted to thank also all the speakers for this particular session, which has been very rewarding and very interesting, especially in light of when the sort of the beginning 2016, when the VLR, I think if I'm not wrong, was first launched by the presentation of City of New York, and then has become, now it's really become an institutional force. And very well articulated. I really appreciate the fact to hear that the Japanese central government also translated some of these very difficult indicators to fit into the local context or the city context and make the work easier. I do have a general question, because in the review and reporting process from the VNR, the same comment I can make about VNR is the fact that these are mostly self-reporting, and as we know that when you review progress, not only self-reporting but also validation will become important. And I think one of the items listed or mentioned in the template from Africa, for example, there's discussion about validation. So I would wanted to invite the speakers to share your thought a little bit more. How can we make this process? One is that it's indeed validated by the citizens, not by only the experts or the officials. And two is really how do we maintain or sustain this particular effort, so over time we accumulated enough data to really derive new knowledge out of it. Otherwise, if we just sort of do it once or twice and that's it, it is great for benchmarking, but it's not allow the cities itself to really review from a historical perspective. So I wonder, under the circumstances when most of the cities are very much resource stripped, what can we do in order to sustain this effort so it becomes an ongoing process? And of course, government changes, the flavor of the day also changes. Sorry.
I think it's a very good question, Alicia. I'm not sure we have people who want to respond now to this. I think, of course, I mean, and then I see Anson that maybe wants to say something. So yeah. Maybe Anson.
Yes, thanks. That's I think an interesting question. I think what is important is self-reporting. Yes, that's what we are encouraging because we want to promote ownership of the process, right? You want to take it away from some centralized process. So if local authorities are doing this on their own, I think to make it sustainable and inclusive, definitely they need to continue raising awareness of the sustainable development goals at the local level. Of course, I think it's good that now we see an increase in SDG awareness. I think the Brookings Institute, I think, has a study that just came up, which looked at SDG mentions in English-speaking media, and I think it's up to 130,000 mentions, which is a huge jump compared to a few years ago. We want to see such an increase at the local level. If the average person on the street can understand what are SDGs, I think that would make an important difference. And if we have to understand, when politicians are campaigning at the local level to say, I want to address your issue of water, your challenges of transport, your challenges related to access to public goods and services, they are talking about SDGs. It's only that they are not using the word SDGs, right? But for citizens, I think once they understand the linkage between what their local politicians are saying with this global agenda that we have, I think that will promote more citizen engagement. They will want more accountability, which means they will want to participate as stakeholders in the affairs of their local authorities. And SDGs, I think, are a good platform for them to really engage and see where are we making progress, where are the challenges, and what can we learn from other neighboring cities and local authorities. And from our side as UNDESA, we are also posting a lot of these local reviews on our website. I've placed the link to DESA's page where we keep all these voluntary local review reports. So there's a wealth of knowledge which is being generated. But I think going forward, partnerships with academia and others who are interested in research, who can go into detail and get some synthesis kind of analysis done to see what can be useful and what can help improve local conditions. I think that is the best way forward. But let's focus on stakeholder engagement. Let's focus on engaging or raising awareness at the local level and hold our politicians or authorities accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I see Lucy move. You want to say to add something quickly? I don't have to close.
Very quickly, just to complement what Amson said, I think that in terms of accountability, that having the dashboards, a lot of cities are putting up dashboards where they're advertising what they've committed to, what SDGs that they've prioritized and what actions are directly linked to those SDGs, and citizens can monitor those as well. So those last beyond political, beyond politics or beyond whoever's in office. Those are commitments that are made across the city and with in partnership with many stakeholders. So they're kind of a living it's a living document rather than just a report. So I think that's also another way to ensure there's accountability beyond one political office.
Thank you very much. So no other burning comments, questions. So I think, I'm sorry, we went a bit beyond the time. So I would like to thank all the speakers very much for that very interesting discussion. And I wish we would be physically in presence or I say face to face together in a meeting, then we can discuss this even after after the meeting. But this was very interesting. It was a very interesting first session of the International Mayors Forum. I would like to thank all the speakers. I'd like to thank also of course the audience, the participants, for the questions, for listening. I invite everyone also tomorrow. We have a second session, and Wednesday and Thursday night. Thursday evening, I mean, in our side of the world. But also, I would like to thank the UNOSD staff and the interns who are making this running very smoothly. And I wish you all the best. I wish we could meet next time, the next meeting also in presence altogether. And I hope to see you tomorrow night. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.